Hello and welcome to the Haaretz podcast. I'm Allison Kaplan-Summer in Tel Aviv. My guest, Ehud Olmert, was a powerful member of the Likud party for decades, before leaving the government and Likud with Ariel Sharon, who became prime minister. After Sharon suffered a debilitating stroke, Olmert stepped into the position of interim prime minister and then became the country's prime minister, leading the country for 3 years. That span of time included both a major war in the north, the Second Lebanon War, and in Gaza, Operation Cast Lead. Olmert stepped down in 2009 under the shadow of a corruption scandal, which ultimately led to a trial, conviction, and 16 months in prison. He was released in 2017. Since then, Olmert has been increasingly outspoken, which led at one point to a defamation suit from the Netanyahu family. In recent months, he has written in Haaretz, harshly criticizing the Netanyahu government's handling of the war and negotiations for hostage release. Former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, welcome and thank you so much for coming on the Haaretz podcast.
Thank you.
Let's start with the headline of your latest op-ed in Haaretz. Netanyahu's messianic coalition partners want an all-out regional war, and Gaza is just a first step. In it, as the headline suggests, you assert that as troubled as many people are by the statements of National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir and Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich regarding a return to the Gaza Strip, that isn't their ultimate plan, that it's only the first step. Can you explain exactly what you mean? What do you think is their plan?
I think the plan is very simple. They want greatest Israel, not greater Israel, greatest Israel. They want Israel. Of course, they want Gaza if possible, but the ultimate destination and the dream of the different movements which they are part of, not necessarily identical in everything, but that they are part of, is to annex the Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, to be part of the state of Israel legally, and naturally to get rid of as many residents of the West Bank as possible. And they understand that the military violent confrontation in the West Bank can be very helpful to achieve this goal. So they want the Gaza battle to continue, not because Gaza itself is the most important part in the program. Gaza is a vehicle, is a corridor, which will expand the violence and the hostilities, and which will trigger confrontation in the West Bank, and if necessary also in the north. Armageddon. When the Armageddon will take place, it will be easy to get rid of to expel many of the citizens of the West Bank, the Palestinians, and get rid of them, kill them and get rid of them, and expel them. This is my understanding of what I know about what they do, the support that they give to the Hilltop youth, not just the support, the encouragement, the incitements, the inspiration that they provide to do what they are doing. They are already doing now. I mean, we don't have to wait for the future. Already now, there are more than 250 Palestinians that were killed in the West Bank since October 7th. Certainly, some of them were terrorists, no doubt about it, and they were killed by the security forces in the course of some kind of confrontation of a terrorist action by them. But the great majority of them were killed in different ways. And I'm afraid not necessarily for good reasons, and not necessarily by the qualified security forces of Israel, but by volunteers, such as the Hilltop Youth. And also, of course, the lynching of Palestinians in the West Bank, the attacks against properties, the statement made by Smotrich that lynch in Hawara should be accomplished by the state, that it will not be a voluntary individual action, but that the state as such should destroy villages and townships in the West Bank. All this comes up to something that I think indicates very clearly what their purpose is.
So you believe they're taking steps, actually behaving in a way that will increase the likelihood of all-out war on all of Israel's borders and in the West Bank, and behaving in such a way, including standing in the way of a hostage deal in order to make sure that war continues to increase the possibility of more Palestinians being driven from Gaza and the West Bank?
There are two ways to address this issue. One is just to try and interpret in a most cool-headed manner what is the practical meaning of what they say publicly. They are against the deal. They say it themselves. They are in favor of continuing the military confrontation with the Hamas, even if it becomes quite clear to everyone in Israel and many outside of the state of Israel, that the idea of dismantling completely, of destroying completely, of removing Hamas from the face of the earth is not realistic. But they want to continue this military operation. And of course, if this military operation will expand to Rafah, it is likely, not certainly, but likely to shatter the peace treaty between Israel and the Egyptians, which is a major blow to the strategic interests of the state of Israel. They are in favor of all of this. They spell it out in a most explicit way. They say that if there will be a deal for the release of the hostages, there will require a truce of many days, as apparently it looks like it may happen. Then they will break the government. So if you just analyze what they say objectively, without attaching any particular purpose or intention to them, it's quite clear to where it leads. It leads to an expanding confrontation in the West Bank, and also their decision to limit the access of Israeli Muslims to the Temple Mount on the month of Ramadan is a prescription for a confrontation which may end up with another intifada. They are fully aware of it. They must be aware of it. Every objective analysis must lead to this inevitable conclusion, and they are in favor of it. So I think there is only one interpretation. They want this because what they want, what they really want, is the West Bank. And in order to have the West Bank in the easiest possible way, which is not easy, but the easiest possible way, is to have a violent confrontation which will allow many of them, together with the security forces under certain circumstances, to kill, to persecute, to force Palestinians to expel them out of where they live, out of where they are, in order to reduce the number of Palestinians, make easier the annexation of the territories.
So judging from his behavior, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, does he actually believe that this is what they want, this is what they're doing, and in order to guarantee his own political survival, because his coalition depends on them staying in the government, he's willing to write them a blank check? Or do you see from his behavior that Netanyahu believes on some level that he can control the descent into what you believe will lead to Armageddon and the possible breaking of historic treaties and peace guarantees that Israel has?
Listen, quite frankly, I don't know what he knows. I don't know what he thinks. I know what he does. And what he does is quite obvious. He gives them a blank check. He initiated the resolution of the cabinet about the Temple Mount, limit of the access of the Muslims to the Temple Mount, which is really outrageous and extremely dangerous. Everyone thinks, and I'm just one of thousands of observers that examine and look at the maneuvering of Netanyahu with regard to the deal for the hostages, that comes to the inevitable conclusion that he's not really interested in agreement, in a deal, because a deal will almost certainly lead to the breakup of the government, and the breakup of the government is a disaster for Netanyahu on a personal basis in terms of his own survivability. And he will not do anything which endangers his survival. So practically, if you examine what he does, then whether he knows, whether he's fully aware, whether he understands, whether he's still in such a nervous breakdown that he does not comprehend completely the possible ramifications of what he's doing, this is what he's doing.
I just used the words nervous breakdown, and I'm remembering that you just suffered from a defamation suit by the Netanyahu family for using such terminology, yet you don't seem afraid of continuing to use it.
I didn't. First of all, I think I won the understanding of a vast majority of the Israeli people of how, objectively speaking, in analyzing and trying to understand the behavior of him and his family, no one can reach another conclusion. But a nervous breakdown is the only way to interpret the way he behaves. I don't know that he suffered a nervous breakdown. I don't have any medical evidence to prove this, but I have brains, I have eyes. I understand what I see. And what I see is the behavior of someone that has gone through a dramatic nervous breakdown, and most likely he still didn't recover from it.
You've written that the odds of achieving the complete elimination of Hamas were not feasible from the moment that Prime Minister Netanyahu declared it the chief goal of the war. Why do you think he overpromised this way?
First of all, because he wanted to be able to say at the end of the day, whenever it will be, that he wanted. It's just that the generals, the commanders, the heads of the different security bodies, the Shin Bet or the army or all the others, were not good enough. And maybe, his poison machine will also say, as some of them already did, that the commanders of the army and the Shin Bet are collaborators with Hamas, that they knew everything from the beginning, and they cooperated with the Hamas in order to bring down Netanyahu. So whether he will say it explicitly or whether he will allow the poison machine that is operated by him to say this, I don't know. But this has been on the public discourse for a long time. Look what happened in the middle of a cabinet session. He says to the head of Mossad, "This is not how you should negotiate." And he criticized him publicly in a very harsh manner for not being tough enough with the Hamas. Who is tough enough with the Hamas? Only Bibi can be, according to him, of course. So I'm looking, and I think everyone can look at a very comprehensive effort of a very sophisticated poison machine that is aimed at one thing, at trying to accuse everyone on everything and trying to re-emphasize time and again that there's only one person who understands the use of power against our adversaries, and this is Netanyahu. And nothing else is of any consequence.
Since December, you've been calling for a ceasefire, not a temporary ceasefire, but a ceasefire that would immediately bring about the next phase of the current conflict, ending hostilities, returning the hostages living and dead, and negotiations mediated by Egypt, you said at the time, on the future of Gaza. So it's 2 months since you've written that, and it still hasn't happened. Is it still your position that that's what we need?
Yeah. Look, I think that we have won this military confrontation big time. Really, I think the performance of the Israeli army and the Israeli security forces, the Israeli Air Force, the coordination between the ground forces and the Air Force, is exemplary, is unbelievable. I don't think that there is any precedent in the modern history of wars where an army was fighting so successfully against terrorist organizations, which is embedded in the urban centers that are crowded with hundreds of thousands of civilians, underground, in tunnels entirely underground, and is doing so well. I remind you that in the 80s, big communist Russia, with all its enormous power, was defeated by the Afghans in Afghanistan, and they had to retreat completely with disgrace. This is not the case here. We really have been doing dramatically well, but the expectation that we can dismantle them completely, there are 2.5 million people living there. Everyone can pick up a gun or an RPG and shoot and kill people hiding behind the debris, which are now accumulating in the Gaza. And there is no way to ever end it completely. To the extent that you can succeed in such a war, we already did. So we have to be smart to think about, in a cool-headed manner, to think about the next step. What is the end game? Let's assume, just for the sake of our discussion, Alison, that we will achieve what Netanyahu has set out as the ultimate goal. And we will destroy completely. There will not be one Hamas left alive. Okay, none of their leaders will survive it. They will all be killed by the sophisticated military operation of Israel. All right, there is no Hamas, but there are still 5 million Palestinians. What are we going to do? What do we want to do with them? What plan do we have? What program is being contemplated by us as to how we deal with 5 million Palestinians, 3 million Palestinians in the West Bank, 2 million Palestinians, perhaps more, in Gaza? What are we going to do? To remain occupiers forever? Is this possible? Is this something that we can live with? Is this something that will not trigger time and again on a daily basis violence, confrontation, terror, hatred? Is it not going to make Israel a pariah in the international community? That the attitude towards Israel will be even worse than it was already now, I think, than it was to South Africa at the time. What do we want? So we have to decide what are the risks that we are going to have to bear with, and how are we dealing with it. And I think that I will never say that there will not be security risks. I will never say, because I think there will. There will be security risks. Terror will not be removed completely. Occupation of almost 60 years, okay, is not going to be forgotten. The bitterness that comes with it, the hatred, the suffering that was part of being under the military occupation. I mean, there is no question about it. There were good historical reasons why we were there in the first place. There was terror, there was hatred, there was Arab belligerency, time and again. They missed many opportunities. All this is true. But at the end of the day, from their side, the almost 60 years of occupation is something that created a great deal of bitterness, of hatred, which will not be removed overnight. So there will be risks, and there will be attempts of terror. And Israel is strong enough when we are not arrogant and we don't take for granted that the Palestinians are a bunch of idiots that are not capable of doing anything now that they proved how efficient in the hatred of Israel they can be in perpetrating what they did. That take the necessary measures to defend ourselves, but we have to pull out. And the best possible prospect for something that can grow out of this positively is a Palestinian state. There will have to be agreed upon within the framework of an agreement between Israel and the Palestinians, with the support of all the moderate Arab countries, and the creation of a new axis of moderate Arab countries that will include the Palestinians and, of course, Egypt and Jordan, and the Emirates and the Saudis and the Bahrainis and the North African countries, and Israel as part of it. So this will create the new horizon that we are looking for. But this government, not only that he doesn't have any idea, he doesn't even want to discuss it or to think about it or to just, argue about it. That's why I think they are so dangerous to the security of the state of Israel, and they have to be removed as soon as possible.
Well, the people on the right are now, the Ben-Gvirs, are trying to score points by saying that with an occupation, there won't be an October 7th, and they're pointing to the disengagement that was the initiative of the government that you were part of, as, they're drawing a line between disengagement and Hamas and what happened to Israel on October 7th.
There is an attempt to assume that the paradigm of the 7th of October is permanent, and therefore that we are doomed to have a similar situation at any time in the future. What happened on the 7th of October? On the 7th of October, all the military power of the state of Israel was absent. We were not there. Had we been there, had we been there with 6 choppers or 8 choppers and 2 brigades, nothing would have happened. Nothing would have happened. There wouldn't have been any 7th of October. So the failure starts with the overconfidence that was inspired, that was spread, that was argued time and again by the Prime Minister, that Hamas is deterred. And Hamas is deterred because of the sophisticated manipulations of Netanyahu, that he thought Netanyahu is a man that is completely tied up to the myth that money can buy everything. This is how he lives in a personal way. And he thought that the money will buy the Hamas, and that if he will avail for them the hundreds of millions that comes from Qatar and from other places, will make it possible for them, that he will buy their acquiescence, that he will buy their cooperation. I mean, this was stupid, childish, narrow-minded, and it brought about a disaster because we behaved like we don't believe that they will ever be able to do what they did. And even when we had all the information, we had all the intelligence, the Israeli intelligence, which was known to be perhaps the best in the universe, and we were so proud of the prestige of the Israeli intelligence in the minds and hearts of so many people across the world. I can tell you, wherever I went, everyone used to say to me, A200, is the greatest thing that was ever created. Now everyone looks at us and say, how, with all the sophistication that you possess, you couldn't find out what they were planning? But the truth is even worse. We knew everything, all the plans, all the maneuvering, everything that they have planned, we knew. But we were so arrogant not to be able to believe that they can accomplish what they have planned, because who are they, these bunch of Palestinians, terrorists, that they can challenge the great empire of the state of Israel that is prepared to destroy Iran at any time? If Iran will deal with us, they will start with us. So I don't know about Iran, but for the time being, 5,000 Palestinian terrorists shook the foundations of the state of Israel. And this is because of arrogance and overconfidence. And this is what can't be the paradigms for the build-up of the future political arrangements that ought to be the basis for a changed Middle East.
You've acknowledged, writing in Haaretz, that as prime minister, you refused the Gilad Shalit deal, which involved releasing a relatively small number of prisoners, fewer than Benjamin Netanyahu ultimately released when he took the deal. Now, however, you favor a deal, you've said, even if Israel needs to release all Hamas prisoners, even those with blood on their hands, in exchange for the hostages. I'm interested in why your views have changed so radically.
Nothing has changed in my attitude. I wouldn't have done the Shalit deal today at any cost. I wouldn't have done it. Even if it may have meant the losing of one soldier. You know how many times I sent soldiers and security guys to missions, wherefrom not all of them came back alive. So the basic allegiance that we have with soldiers and the security forces is that under certain circumstances, when the need arises for the security of the state of Israel, we have the moral right to send them to fight, even at the risk of them not coming back. But the hostages that were abducted and that are now waiting more than 142 days in the tunnels, they are not soldiers. They are Israeli citizens that were waiting to celebrate their holidays on Saturday morning in their homes, in their living rooms, in their bedrooms, in their safe rooms, in where they live. And we deserted them. We, the state of Israel, we deserted them. We ignored the basic fundamental obligation that we have to defend the lives of Israelis against enemies that come from outside. We were not there to defend them, and we have no right now to desert them and not to make every possible effort at any cost to bring them back. That's all. And this is entirely different from what was the case with Gilad Shalit.
Do you think that National Unity Party's Benny Gantz and Gadi Eisenkot, the former opposition members who are now sitting in the war cabinet, are doing the right thing by being in that war cabinet and participating in the decisions, basically keeping an eye on Netanyahu and Itamar Ben-Gvir and the rest of the direction of the government? Or do you think that their participating in this is legitimizing the government and they would be best returning to the opposition?
Look, I have to say, both. I know them both. In a way, I was their boss when I was prime minister, and they were in the general staff of the state of Israel, and they worked with me in different ways. Occasionally, it's part of my responsibility and theirs. They are good guys, both of them, decent, good, patriotic, courageous, fighters. Nothing that anyone can say can change this. They are the best guys that we have. But I was afraid that if they will join the cabinet, and anticipating what the cabinet under Netanyahu wants and what he is aspiring for, and what the disasters that he is responsible for, that on the day that he will be expelled, that he will be thrown out in disgrace, that there is a danger that they will be thrown out with him. And I said then that I want them to remain outside. They can give advice, they can participate in discussions with the Prime Minister, Defense Minister, without being members of the cabinet, because we need an alternative leadership to take over when Netanyahu will be thrown away. And so that was the reason why I didn't want them to join, although, of course, their advice and their judgment and their experience is of great significance. At this point now, looking at what the cabinet is doing, the behavior of the prime minister, the decisions that the cabinet is taking, the effect that the prime minister gave a negative answer to the about the participation of an Israeli delegation a couple of weeks ago in the negotiations for a deal on the hostages, without even advising Gantz and Eisenkot. A legitimate question arose: if they are not consulted with, if they are not taking part in decisions of this significance, so what's the use of their being in the cabinet? And I think that this question comes again and again into the center of the political discussion now in Israel, for good reasons.
So I think your answer is that you think they would be better off leaving?
I think that we will be better off if they leave. My focus is not the personal fate of Eisenkot or Gantz. But on a personal basis, I don't know what's good for them. I know what may be good for us, for the state of Israel, for the security of the state of Israel, for the status of the state of Israel, for the solidarity within the Israeli society. That's what I think is of significance, and that's what should guide them.
You just made headlines in a Middle East newspaper website by saying in an interview that, quote, Israel has no means to be able to destroy the nuclear program of Iran. A lot of people might think that, but very few Israeli officials and commentators will say that out loud. Do you think it was a good idea to make that assertion?
Number one, I'm not a commentator. Number two, I'm not an official. Number three, I may have the knowledge that maybe some others don't. Look, Israel has the capacity, the strength, and the means to cause enormous damage to Iran. And I said it all the time, I never hesitated to say it. We can destroy, we can attack Iran in a way that will cause a dramatic impact to Iran on important strategic positions in Tehran and in many other parts of the country. We did many things in the past, which I don't think is wise to now spell it out. What we can do, because of objective reasons, we don't have the reach to the different sites where they develop their nuclear plants to the extent that they do it. And I don't know exactly, I'm not privy to the intelligence information, but we definitely don't have the means to reach out to all these places. And I think that it is quite obvious. The Iranians know it, we know it, and the threats made by the Israeli spokesman sometimes is, again, the repetition of the same arrogance and overconfidence and childishness and stupidity, which we have to refrain from. Everyone knows that we can't do it. We can do a great deal of harm to Iran, but not that.
My final question is about the calls on the streets in Israel, which are growing for new elections, for the replacement of Netanyahu somehow. You've said repeatedly, including now, that the government needs to be replaced. Do you now support doing this even in wartime, or do you think it needs to wait until after the war?
We are 4 months late in doing it. So I don't think that we can afford to wait any day. It has to be done today. And I'm afraid that it will not be done in the traditional parliamentarian manner that under normal circumstances is what we would prefer. The eruption of volcano happens without any pre-warnings. it suddenly happens, and when it erupts, it sweeps everything with it. And I think that we are very close that such an eruption will take place in Israel, with millions of people that are unhappy, that feel insulted, that feel humiliated, that feel neglected by this government and the bunch of terrorists which seem to be in control of the prime minister. And the attitude to the hostages, to the families that are rioting in the streets in order to try and save them, to the soldiers that are serving already 140 days in the reserves, exposing themselves to the risks on a daily basis. And all of this will build up into an eruption of rage that will be volcanic and that will change everything in Israeli politics. How soon it will happen? I want it to happen tonight. Again, I'm not talking about any non-democratic event. I'm talking about the expression of the public discontent to the extent that we'll have to force a political change and early elections, and the sooner the better.
Former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. Thank you so much for answering our questions so thoughtfully.
Thank you.
And that wraps things up for the Haaretz podcast. Thanks to my guest, Ehud Olmert, to my producer, Avri Rosenzvi, and editor, Nara Malkin. I'm Alison Kaplan-Summer, and until next week, shalom from Tel Aviv.